Order, the Honourable Tariana Turia.
Tēnei te mihi atu ki te whaine pimia wehi kua ngaro ki te pō e takoto ana ki waihi rere marae, te waine o ngā pō wei, nā reira e te mārei kura e te kuia aere atura. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to mihi to my colleague me Teria Ture for sharing with us the story of her dad, who was a mokopuna in uri o te kāhui maunga, no Hiriu Harama, no te awa o Wanganui, ka nui te mihi atu ki a koe me Teria. The Māori Party implores this Parliament to wake up to the age-old crisis associated with the lack of social investment. It brings no joy to my heart to see headlines such as those in the Taranaki Daily News just 3 days ago, Māori worse off in jobless figures. The Māori unemployment rate is now more than double the unemployment rate for all ethnicities, and it is particularly marked for our young. And I stand here feeling almost ashamed, given that I have responsibility for young Māori and young Pacific unemployment. But as every politician in this House knows, the appalling statistics around Māori unemployment are not a new song being sung in the last 2 years only. If we cast our minds over the past decades, the figures have been consistently depressing, the worst being in the 1980s. High youth Māori and Pacific unemployment during the years of so-called plenty in the 2000s. Māori nurses working in the NGO sector, no pay parity for them in the years of plenty. These issues represent governments who have routinely failed Māori, and they have failed this country. The Māori Party has spoken of this history when we're a party of one, a party on the benches of opposition, and now a party in a coalition arrangement with the government. We speak of this history to remind the House that we must all own the structural factors that have led to system breakdown. Why is it that in a time of plenty the Labour government did so little to address the collateral damage of Māori and Pacific unemployment? Why is it that in a national government so ready to talk about building the conditions for more enduring and better paid jobs, that there is seemingly such an unwillingness to be bold enough to invest in the rangatahi Māori, to equip them to be the leaders of tomorrow? And of course I could take us back much further to assess the impacts of the price of citizenship, the loss of land, the myth that employment would come from the waves of urban migration, the pain of betrayal from political parties which carried our vote with careless disregard, generations of aspirations unfulfilled, expectations unrealised. But we have always known that it could be, it should be so different. In the very first Māori Party speech in this Parliament on the 27th of July in 2004, I spoke about why a Māori Party was so important. Ko tēnei te wā o te ao Māori. It is time to look to ourselves. That is how we are different to other political parties. We are a political movement creating change from the people up, and our policies reflect that. Our politicians will not be telling you what's good for you. Our politicians will be listening to you for that. Those words are as relevant today as they were then. We are a proudly self-determining people who have been devising our own solutions and creating our strategies long before the state considered welfare reform to be the answer. It is time for a bold government to orientate itself to the biggest challenge of our time, social investment in our future. What we put off today will threaten our tomorrow. Every party knows that there is a large number of young people who have been failed by the system. Anyone can point the finger at families, at government, at politicians for where we have all gone wrong. But who will be brave enough to turn that finger back on themselves, to face up to their responsibilities, to make decisions on what is right, fair and just, rather than political expediency. What we really need is solutions that will be enduring. We all know that so many of our whānau, both tangata whenua and Pacific nations, are fighting for their survival. They are working 2 or 3 jobs just to tread water. Their income levels are insufficient for them to stay afloat. That is why the Māori Party has consistently raised with both Labour and National that if they really wanted to make the difference, they would raise the minimum wage. We called for the minimum wage to be lifted at least 2/3 of the average wage, which conservatively would be at least $15 an hour. If we are really dedicated in our pursuit of economic transformation, low wages cannot be tolerated. And what do we get? A miserable 25 cents. The argument is always the same, that minimum wage growth above $13 will constrain employment growth. We need to be able to demonstrate that we will protect workers on low incomes, that we will value fairness, we will reduce the gross income inequalities, and we will incentivise workers to maintain participation in the labour market. But we need to do more than raise incomes and create jobs. We must take seriously all the evidence that tells us that education will be the driver of opportunity and that culture counts. We know what works, but we must provide authentic cultural learning environments for our children, that we acknowledge this is a systemic issue and that we have the power to change that. We need to focus on science and innovation to create long-term jobs for our rangatahi and who have a right to be included and seen for their potential and for what they can do rather for what they can't. We need to learn from the example of schools like Clover Park Middle School and Te Whānau or Tupuranga in Auckland, which take up the responsibility to right the wrongs. They understand the importance of contributing to the development of a strong, secure cultural identity of their students is integral to successful participation and achievement. Finally, I want to address some of the misinformation that has come into the public arena around the coalition arrangement that our members agreed to take up. Our constituents thought long and hard about whether it was better to spend our days in anger, bemoaning what could have been, or whether we should do all that we could to make a difference for our wānau hapa and iwi by taking on the challenge of government. Let me assure the House, we have not been a docile partner by any means. We have fought the line. We have put the case in all the vigour that our people expected of us to set a better foundation for our tamariki and mokopuna. And all I want to say, that the Labour Party is in no position to exploit our situation for political gain. There wouldn't be a party in the House who hasn't experienced conflict within their midst. Finally, I want to return to the challenge given to us by Matua Whatarangi Winiata, who told us that the most important task we have in Parliament is to work for the survival of our people. We will do whatever it takes to focus on that goal. We will form alliances. We will reach agreements. We will demand the very highest standards of ourselves as a team, because this is the greatest opportunity that we have to make a difference. We know that if our people survive and flourish, then our country will only be the better for it. And that is why we have travelled so constantly and so far afield, in order to bring the people's voices into these chambers. We have sat in the company of Māori providers. We have seen at first hand the success of Māori businesses. We have learnt about the innovative approaches being taken by whānau Māori. And we have brought those stories to the table. We have trusted our people, investing in their sense of self-belief, building on their impressive resilience in the context of our wānau hapa and iwi. And all that we ask of any government is that they too can invest in our success by placing their trust in the power of the people to do for themselves. Kia ora.